this episode, we move from simply noticing security activity to making good decisions about what deserves attention first. New learners often picture security teams racing from one dramatic alert to another, but most real work begins with a calmer question, and that question is whether a reported event actually matters right now. That early decision process is called triage, and it sits at the center of practical security operations because it helps defenders sort urgency from routine noise. A team that cannot triage well may waste energy on harmless activity while missing events that point to real risk. A team that triages well does not need perfect certainty at the beginning. It needs enough structure, judgment, and context to decide what to investigate quickly, what to watch, and what can safely wait without increasing danger to the organization. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Triage in cybersecurity is similar to triage in other high-pressure environments because the purpose is not to solve everything at once. The purpose is to decide where attention should go first based on the best information available at the moment. A security event might be a login attempt, a malware warning, a suspicious network connection, a change in permissions, or an unusual action involving sensitive data. Some events are harmless, some are uncertain, and some clearly deserve immediate review. The challenge is that defenders rarely receive events in a neat and obvious form. They often receive fragments of information, partial clues, and repeated alerts that may or may not describe the same problem. Good triage gives order to that uncertainty by helping a team assess the meaning of an event, estimate its possible impact, and make a reasonable first decision before a full investigation begins. One of the most important things for beginners to understand is that triage is not the same as deep analysis. During triage, the goal is not to answer every question or prove every detail beyond doubt. The goal is to make a smart initial judgment about significance, urgency, and likely next steps. That means asking practical questions such as what happened, who or what was involved, whether the activity looks unusual, whether sensitive systems or data are connected, and whether the event fits a pattern already known to be important. A team that confuses triage with full investigation may become slow and overwhelmed because it treats every event as though it deserves the same amount of effort. A team that skips triage altogether may react too quickly or ignore warning signs without enough thought. Strong security operations depend on this middle stage, where events are screened and shaped into priorities before more time and resources are committed. A useful way to think about triage is to imagine a crowded emergency call board where not every report carries the same level of danger. One report might describe a routine software issue, another might suggest stolen credentials, and another might hint at active data theft. If all of them are treated as equally urgent, the team loses focus and human attention gets scattered. If the team ignores too much, important harm may grow before anyone responds. That is why triage depends on prioritization. Prioritization means deciding what moves to the front of the line based on risk, impact, and evidence. It is not about guessing wildly or rewarding the loudest alert. It is about using consistent criteria so that high-value assets, sensitive data, unusual access, control changes, and suspicious patterns receive the attention they deserve, while lower-risk activity is still recorded without disrupting the entire operation. This is where use cases become very important. In security operations, a use case is a defined situation or pattern that tells a team what kind of activity it wants to detect and why that activity matters. A use case is not just a technical trigger. It is more like a practical security question translated into watchable behavior. For example, a team may care about whether an account is trying to log in from multiple locations in a short period, whether a new administrator account appears unexpectedly, or whether sensitive files are accessed in ways that do not match normal business behavior. Each of those examples represents a use case because it describes a pattern that could signal abuse, compromise, or control failure. Use cases help beginners because they turn vague concern into focused attention. Instead of trying to watch everything equally, a team builds known categories of meaningful activity and prepares to recognize them faster. Good use cases also help security teams stay connected to real business risk instead of drifting into technical busy work. If a company cares deeply about customer records, payroll systems, cloud administration, or privileged accounts, then the strongest use cases should reflect those realities. That means the team is not merely chasing strange events for their own sake. It is watching for events that could cause real harm to operations, trust, confidentiality, integrity, or availability. This matters because a small, unusual event on a low-value system may deserve less urgency than a subtle change involving a highly sensitive system. Beginners sometimes assume that the most technically dramatic alert should always come first, but that is not how prioritization works in practice. A calm event touching critical data can matter more than a noisy event touching a minor device. Use cases create focus by linking what the team watches to what the organization genuinely needs to protect. Prioritization becomes easier when defenders understand the difference between severity and importance. A system may describe an alert as severe based on what kind of behavior it detected, but the team still has to ask whether that alert is important in the context of the environment. An alert on an isolated test system may not demand the same response as a quieter signal involving a finance server, a human resources application, or a privileged cloud account. This is why context matters so much during triage. Defenders consider who the user is, what asset is involved, what kind of access was attempted, whether the action is normal for that role, and whether the event aligns with known attack patterns or internal mistakes. Prioritization is strongest when it blends technical signal with business meaning. That combination helps teams avoid reacting only to labels while still taking genuinely dangerous events seriously even when the initial alert itself looks moderate rather than dramatic. Another major concept in this episode is correlation, and correlation is what helps separate isolated noise from meaningful patterns. Correlation means connecting multiple events that may appear unremarkable on their own, but become much more important when viewed together. One failed login might be routine. A password reset followed by a successful login from a new location, followed by access to sensitive data, followed by a permissions change tells a much more serious story. Correlation helps security teams see that story. It allows them to connect time, user activity, device behavior, network movement, and system changes into a single picture that better reflects risk. For beginners, the easiest way to understand correlation is to think of it as assembling a puzzle. Each individual piece may not look important at first, but when several related pieces fit together, a much clearer image appears and the team can make stronger triage decisions. Correlation is especially valuable because attackers often try to avoid triggering one obvious warning. They may spread activity across time, use legitimate accounts, move carefully, and hide inside processes that seem normal at first glance. If defenders look at each event in isolation, those actions may slip by as routine or low priority. When related events are combined, however, the pattern can become much harder to ignore. A user account that rarely accesses administrative systems may suddenly do so after several login failures. A device may begin contacting unfamiliar destinations shortly after a suspicious file is opened. A service account may start performing actions outside its expected purpose. None of those facts alone always proves malicious intent, but correlation helps defenders notice when several small clues begin to point in the same direction. That ability is central to effective triage because it helps the team respond to actual patterns of concern rather than just a pile of disconnected technical messages. There is another reason correlation matters for prioritization, and that reason is efficiency. If 5 alerts are really part of one underlying problem, it is wasteful and confusing to treat them as 5 unrelated cases. A team may duplicate effort, miss the larger pattern, or lose track of the real cause. Correlation helps combine related events so the team can focus on the underlying issue rather than the repeated symptoms. This reduces confusion and supports better use of limited time. For a beginner, this is a very practical point. Security teams do not just need good information. They need information organized in ways that help humans decide and act. Correlation turns scattered records into something closer to a useful narrative. Once the team sees that a cluster of events belongs together, It can prioritize that cluster based on likely impact and urgency instead of spending energy on each signal separately as though it emerged from a different world. A simple example can bring triage, use cases, prioritization, and correlation together. Imagine a normal employee account that first shows several failed logins, then a successful login from a place the user does not normally connect from, then unusual access to a data repository, and finally an attempt to create a forwarding rule in email. If viewed one event at a time, each action may seem explainable. People mistype passwords, travel, open files, and change settings. But the combination of these events fits several meaningful use cases involving account misuse, abnormal access, and possible data exposure. Correlation reveals that the events are connected. Prioritization then asks how much damage this account could cause and whether sensitive systems or data are involved. Triage uses all of that context to decide that this activity deserves immediate attention, even before the team fully confirms whether the cause is a compromised account, insider misuse, or some other explanation. It is also important to understand that triage does not end with a single label. It usually leads to an action path. Some events are escalated for urgent investigation, some are watched for more evidence, some are closed as benign after review, and some are used to improve future use cases because they exposed a blind spot or a poor alert condition. This is why documentation and reasoning matter during triage. A good team does not simply say this looks bad or this seems fine. It records why the event was treated a certain way, what context influenced that decision, and what the next step should be. That habit supports consistency and learning over time. Beginners should see triage as both a decision point and a feedback point. Every event helps the team refine what it considers meaningful, what it can safely deprioritize, and which combinations of clues should trigger faster response in the future. Human judgment remains critical throughout this process. Use cases, prioritization rules, and correlated events can guide attention, but they do not replace thinking. A strong triage analyst asks whether the event makes sense in the environment, whether the user behavior fits the business role, whether a recent change explains the activity, and whether the available evidence is strong enough to support escalation. At the same time, good judgment means avoiding the trap of assuming that familiar activity must be harmless. Attackers often depend on defenders dismissing something because it looks almost normal. The best triage mindset is disciplined rather than emotional. It is skeptical without being paranoid and practical without being careless. That balance helps teams avoid two dangerous extremes. One extreme is chasing every minor signal as though it were a crisis. The other is ignoring subtle but meaningful patterns because no single alert looked dramatic enough on its own. Over time, mature security teams improve triage by reviewing outcomes and asking whether their use cases, prioritization choices, and correlation logic are helping them find the right problems sooner. If important incidents were missed, the team studies why. If too many low-value alerts consumed attention, the team studies that too. The purpose is not to create a perfect system, because no environment is perfect and no detection logic catches everything. The purpose is to strengthen the connection between meaningful signals and timely action. That means better use cases, clearer prioritization based on business risk, and stronger correlation of related activity. Beginners should take confidence from that idea. Good triage is not a mysterious talent that only experts have. It is a repeatable way of thinking that becomes stronger with practice, feedback, and a better understanding of how technical events connect to real organizational harm. As we close, the most important lesson is that triage helps security teams turn a flood of events into decisions that protect time, attention, and risk exposure. Use cases give defenders a reason to watch for specific patterns, prioritization decides what deserves action first, and correlation reveals how smaller clues may belong to a larger and more meaningful story. When those three ideas work together, a team becomes much better at noticing what matters without getting trapped by noise. For a beginner, that is a powerful shift in perspective. Security operations are not about reacting to everything with equal intensity. They are about building a thoughtful process that recognizes context, focuses on risk, and moves the right events forward before real damage grows. That is what makes triage one of the most practical and valuable skills in modern cybersecurity.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.